call ourselves LEO, which stands for Life Ecology Organization, and the idea is that the outside system of life and the inside system in your brain have a big effect on how you function as a human being and how happy you are. And you actually have to start thinking in terms of the outside and the inside systems in order to really shape your brain to be more effective and to be more happy. So there's a whole team that's helped us get to this place, and you will also help. Like, we're constantly learning from everyone that we come into contact with, and so this is something that we all shape together for the betterment of everyone. Okay, so I want you to be a part of this as well. Then what we found is no matter what group we worked with, it worked. Whether it was chronic pain patients, golf, a Division I golf team, doing webinars, as well as working with organizational teams, no matter where we went, there were positive results, which meant that we all have this ability to change. We all have the ability to shift our brain functioning to higher and higher levels, and so it's a very hopeful message. The initial part of this talk is a little bit of a downer, but keep in mind that ultimately the message is very positive and it's very hopeful, so hang in there for that first part. So as we went along, I mean, every group that we worked with had these kinds of results. Quality of life improved, anxiety levels dropped, depression levels dropped, just dramatic stories. You saw some of the testimonials. Leadership abilities improved dramatically, and this is on a scale of like 1 to 5 or 1 to 4. I mean, these are huge changes in everything. A physician friend who had sleep problems, his sleep problems went away, which is a sign that we have a lot more anxiety than we realize. So lots of sleep improvement has been recorded with every group that we've run through these concepts. The golf team we worked with, also amazing results. It doesn't even matter if you golf or not. Watch what happens with this. So this is a typical golf team, Division I, really high level of golf. Each line represents a tournament, 3 rounds in a tournament. The main thing is that the score needs to go down. That's all you have to know from that graph, okay? But it's jumping all over the place, and it's usually going up because the competition gets more intense. Golf is like a constant failure experiment. It's really frustrating, and I golf. And so you see the scores are sort of jumping all over the place, and they're going up. So then we worked with the Marquette golf team a couple of years ago, and you'll see the before and you'll see the after. And this is a group of 4 or 5 golfers, and look at what happened after we worked with them. Dramatic improvements. They became so, basically stress resistance and stress resilience went up. They became so stabilized in their brains that failure and difficulty didn't affect them nearly as much. And so they were able to, failure just bounced off of them, and they were able to adapt a lot faster. And that's why their scores became so stable and kept improving. It gets even better. So 4 different golfers, they went on to win 2 Big East championships. They'd only won 1 in 25 years. They went on to win 2. And 4 different golfers went on to dominate the Wisconsin amateur golf circuit. Not even college, like all of Wisconsin. And they will tell you like how this changed their lives in terms of how they approach life in general. So that was a really cool story. So the takeaway from these results, 100% group level success, substantial reductions in anxiety, depression, fear, and even addiction. Really great stories of addiction going away, better work and athletic performance. If 18 to 22-year-olds can do this, like we can do this, right? And so the point about this is we are so much more malleable in our brains than we realize, and so much more capable of being stress resistant and stress resilience, and we need it now, and we're going to explain why. So this is the downer part of the talk. So if you look at the headlines now, it's chaos out there. Depression levels are skyrocketing, addiction levels are skyrocketing, alcoholism, you name it. Illegal drug-related death. I mean, there's been 1.3 million deaths in all the wars combined in this country over the last 200 years. But we've actually had 1.5, and this is not an anti-gun speech, but we've had 1.5 million deaths from guns in just the past 50 years. 40,000 deaths per year. CDC said that the number of illegal drug-related deaths has crossed 100 deaths per day. We've got behavior-related deaths in general, obesity, alcohol, smoking, violence. For the first time, this is stunning what happened last year. Public health specialists were shocked by these results. But Caucasian men ages 30 to 50, their life expectancy dropped. It didn't happen in Canada. It didn't happen in Europe. It didn't happen to African Americans. It happened to Caucasian men in this country. Their life expectancy dropped. what is going on? Any thoughts on why this is happening? By the end of this, you will have a really complete model of understanding all the crazy stuff that's happening in our world, including some of the political chaos. By the way, I'm not political. I don't care if you're left or right. There was absolute political radicalism. This is what just happened. On the left, you had a socialist candidate that almost made it there, and on the right, you had a very atypical candidate that made it all the way to the presidency. So whether you're left or right, this is crazy what's happening. Here's a very interesting question. This you have to respond to, just with a show of hands. Who's got the #1 economy in the world? Raise your hand if it's China. Is China the biggest economy in the world? Or is it the United States that's the biggest economy in the world? Mostly China, I'd say, is one. Typically, when I'd ask this question, 80% will say China, and about 20% will say, maybe 10% will say the United States. It's not even close. The United States is still the dominant economy in the world. We're still $7 trillion of GDP ahead of the Chinese. But our psyche is that we're #2 now. Our psyche has gone to China's #1, we're #2. That's part of the story of why we're panicking a little bit. And per capita income is even more of a disparity. So my answer to why we're having political chaos, why we're having violence, why we're having addiction, why we're having alcoholism, all these problems are happening at an accelerating rate, is anxiety. We have a lot of anxiety right now. Why that matters for you as leaders is that you are actually in the trenches of a war that you don't realize is happening, but you're about to realize where that war is and how you can win this battle, and why we need you as leaders to win this battle for the sake of our society, for the sake of our getting back to being great as a nation. So loss of identity. We thought we were the best. Now we kind of not sure we're the best anymore. The world is changing rapidly. Our share of total economic output has dropped. The Western world has gone from 75% to like 48%, right? So the rest of the world is charging, coming on fast. You've got robots, hungry nations, immigrants. Everyone's like, all the industries are getting radicalized, disrupted. Healthcare is coming too, and I can tell you from my vantage point, there's more and more coming. Physician burnout is at 50% right now because the change is so fast, and they don't have the tools to be able to deal with this, which is very ironic. And so the problem is that people don't have the ability to adapt to how fast the change is coming. But there is a lot of hope of how quickly you can stabilize your brain and become adaptable. So this is a war going on right now, right? Those are the first shots of a potential revolution that's happening in this country and elsewhere. So what are we going to do about it? We'll get some really practical insight and tools to be able to deal with these problems. And we need you, like Uncle Sam, we really need you to step up, learn this, stabilize, kind of like when the oxygen mask drops in the airplane, right? You got to put it on yourself first, and then you got to take care of everybody else. So we need you to put on the oxygen mask of helping your brain become more powerful, more stable, more stress resistant, resilient, and then you're going to become more and more courageous and able to help everybody around you then, okay? Where's the war? The war turns out to be in your brain, and we're going to show you why that's happening right now and what you can do to win the battle or the war. So neuroplasticity, anybody want to, what is neuroplasticity? Beautiful. Ability of your brain to change. Thank you. That's better than what I would have said. This is what I would have said. It'll be a lot more complicated and probably not as useful. So this is your nervous system, right? This is our computer system, basically. These are all the nerves and how they're interconnected. And we only recently discovered that we have the ability to grow these neural networks till the day we die. That's a recent discovery. And that we all have the ability to do this. That's a recent discovery. So we thought that each one of these is, I don't have a laser pointer here, but each one, the big one is a nerve. And so we thought these didn't grow anymore. But we did realize, we only recently discovered that the branches can keep forming till the day we die. And that's a big deal. So that means we can expand our computer system till the day we die and as much as we want, okay? I might even stand over here and stare at these folks for a little while too. So let me give you some examples of neuroplasticity, the ability of your brain to grow as much as you want it to. Nuns, these gracious nuns, thousands of them donated their brains after they died, of course. And they weren't that gracious. And so what they found is that many of them had Alzheimer's plaques in their brain. They should have had Alzheimer's, but none of them did. So what they were able to do is just reroute and rewire all the way around those Alzheimer's plaques in order to not get Alzheimer's. Really amazing results. This young lady, this is a PBS series called Brain. She had to have the right side of her brain removed because of seizures. But she was able to reconstitute all the functionality from the right brain into the left brain, which is incredible what she did. 9-year-old, I think. Just think about this. It's our thoughts that shape our brain. That's it. Our thoughts literally bring all the neuroplasticity to action. Our thoughts will determine how powerful our brain is or how destabilized our brain is. That's how much power we all have, right? That's kind of scary because if you see the talent is overrated, that it's not talent, it's time, and it's really difficult time. It's kind of the responsibility is now on us for shaping our lives and shaping our brains and making our lives as effective and happy as we can. So that's a scary prospect. But the good news is we got you covered here. We're going to show you where to channel that power and how to accelerate the neuroplasticity and your overall effectiveness. And the reality is that you can take anything in life, whether it's leadership, difficult conversations, decision-making, data analytics, customer service, it doesn't matter what it is. I can turn anything into a process, a schematic, and I can take, and process equals neural network. So no matter what it is, I can make my neural network become better for the sake of dealing with whatever I want to get better at, okay? So there's unlimited potential to become great, good, and then great or even excellent at whatever you want to work on. So, but we have some suggestions for where you should put that neuroplasticity power, and that's what the rest of the talk is going to be. We're going to give you targeted aspects of the brain that you should consider shrinking and expanding, and then see what happens in your lives, okay? So we talked about the war that's going on. The war is inside the brain, and we're going to help you understand why this war is happening. And this is where the battlefield is. It's in your brain. And this is where you need to shift your energy. Like, we as Americans are extremely innovative. And when we have a war to fight or a mission to rise to, we do it. But right now, we've kind of lost our bearings. We're sort of all over the place. We're panicking. We're anxious. We don't know where we fit in the world. The world's moving fast. Our educational system doesn't do a good enough job of creating lifelong learners. We're not able to be emotionally vulnerable enough to be adaptable, to be scared, to be anxious, to talk about that, work through it, and then go back to neuroplasticity. We struggle with that. And so this is where we need to fight the war. And you as leaders are critical to being able to learn this and then teach all the people that follow you and then bring these ideas into your community as well in order to help our society become more stable. This is in your handout, so don't try to memorize this or write it all down. But basically, this battle between lower brain, and we'll define it, the battle between lower brain and higher brain literally determines everything in your life. It will determine how good your relationships are. It'll determine how effective you are in work. It'll determine how healthy you are. It'll determine how happy you are. Literally everything is determined by which part of your brain dominates, okay? So if you even take one thing away from this talk and you're really disciplined about thinking about it 40 or 50 times a day, your brain will start to shape higher and higher. Neuroplasticity will cause your higher brain to become more dominant, and you'll notice the changes that will start to happen. Because as you become higher brain dominant, you become more stress resistant and stress resilient. Things don't affect you the same. It's amazing when the change starts to happen. Things that used to really make me anxious or even piss me off just bounce off of me. I'm not perfect. There are still things that get me, but it's a lot less than it used to be because of changes that are happening. The opposite of that is being very stress prone and lower brain going brrr, and causing a lot of destruction in the brain and the body. Similarly, if the higher brain's activated, you have more focus and you have more functional IQ. The opposite of that is ADHD and ADD, which we have an explosion of now, right? It's because we are more lower brain dominant as a society. Love, peace, and joy are feelings that become more dominant as you become higher brain activated. The opposite of that is fear, anxiety, stress, and even addiction in order to self-medicate the pain that we're feeling. So that's what's happening is we as a society have become very lower brain dominant, and we need to reverse that. Optimism and energy is created by the higher brain. The opposite of that is depression and lethargy, creativity, emotional openness, etc. So we can actually now look at you from the outside with scans and measuring hormones and certain protein messengers, and we can tell how happy you are, how stress resistant you are, how effective you are as a human being, how good you are in relationships. Can you imagine that? We can actually now know where you are. And so if you're lower brain dominant, you're designed to get high, as we'll explain, but your happiness will jump all over the place. If you're higher brain dominant, your happiness just keeps going higher and higher and higher, and it's much more stable. So that's what's at stake here, happiness and effectiveness by virtue of brain functioning in the higher brain mode instead. So why do we even have a lower brain? Like if it's causing all these problems, fear, anxiety, depression, addiction, all that alphabet soup of problems, why do we even have a lower brain? So think about this. Average life expectancy for most of human history. I won't bother doing the whole hands thing, but just think it in your mind. What do you think the average life expectancy is? Is it 70 plus, 60, 50, 40, 30? Think about that for a couple seconds. Most people say 40 or 50. Some people say 70. Answer, 27. 27 is our average life expectancy for most of human history. Why? Why are we dying at such a young age? Think about these. There's about 3 of these that are the answer and 3 that aren't the answer. So think about that a little bit. Most people will say infection. Some people will say heart disease. But those are all modern. They're only in the last couple thousand years. It's actually predators, starvation, and exposure. Why? This part most people know. How do we get food for most of human history? What's that? Hunt. Thank you, Megan. Hunting and gathering, okay? These are hunter-gatherer brains in a modern world. In fact, we've only had farming for 5,000 years. We've had this human or humanoid function for 5 million years. So what's the percentage? 0.1%, like tiny, tiny, tiny piece of that have we been farming. The vast majority of human history, we have been hunter-gatherers. And so when the food runs out, we starve, we kill each other for the last morsels of food, we get exposed, being on the run, trying to find more food, so exposure is a problem. So that's why we were dying at a very young age. So that's why the brain had to develop some mechanisms to compensate for that. How do we not die so young? So what are the best strategies for surviving predators and climate and starvation? They're pretty logical. It's knowledge, it's tools, it's tribe, and it's hibernating or getting away in the cave, escaping from all the threats. Okay? So the best strategy for dealing with all the sources of death, predators, famine, exposure, there's one strategy that's really good at dealing with all those, and that is hibernation. It's disappearing, it's getting away. I can do calculations for you and show you that you can not eat for 3 or 4 months. So you can escape winter, you can escape starvation, the famine period, you can escape the predators, you can escape climate. Why does that matter? So the brain invented a chemical to be able to help with hibernation. Okay, so it's logical that if you're going to hibernate, you need to increase calorie storage, which is fat is the best way to store calories, and you need to drop the calorie burn rate. That's logical, right? There's one hormone that does that. What's interesting is this is also a recent discovery. In fact, when I asked most physicians this question, they don't get this answer, which is fascinating to me. So this is all really cutting edge stuff that you're getting insight on. Any thoughts on what that hormone? You can't say it, Megan, because you watched the video. Guesses? Anybody want to yell out a hormone or a chemical? Sometimes people will say serotonin, they'll say adrenaline, but it turns out that it's cortisol. So cortisol is the stress hormone. And what cortisol does that we recently discovered, so cortisol is really good. Stress, stress, stress increases abdominal fat deposition, more calories. But what we recently discovered is that cortisol also starts to disconnect your higher brain. It actually starts to snip all that neuroplasticity and cut all those neural networks, so it starts to take your power away from you. That's how much power you have to do self-destruction. Every time you feel stress, you're potentially causing problems up here. So what it does, for example, there's a part of the brain called the anterior cingulate gyrus that represents hope, energy, and optimism. If you disconnect that, that's called depression. So no one's thought about the fact that depression is actually a really good survival tool. Like, why is it there? And we think of it as a sign of weakness. Anxiety, sign of weakness. Even addiction, sign of weakness. And we're here to tell you that it's not a sign of weakness. It's actually a sign of incredible power at being able to survive. But that survival machinery is being bombarded by the modern world and getting thrown off. So it's getting the wrong message, and it's starting to disconnect the higher brain unintentionally. And we need to stop that for ourselves and then everybody around us. Okay? So for most of human history, stress represented the risk of death. That's it. But now, modern stress, the brain doesn't know the difference. All it's seeing is cortisol coming across, and it's like, oh boy, it's time to really shut it down, isn't it? We need to really hunker down and get away from the death risk. And so it does it for you, and we don't want it to do it because we don't want to take off hope, energy, and optimism. So you have to be very careful about your power to shape your brain. And in fact, this is another great book. About a third of our population are considered sensitives, introverts. They are very powerful. They take more nerve traffic into their brain. And so the idea that sensitives are somehow weak turns out also to be wrong. They are more effective in careers, more effective in relationships, but it's a double-edged sword. If the data they're taking into their brain is more negative, they have more anxiety, depression, and addiction because they cut their higher brains off faster than everybody else does. The sensitives are very powerful, and we need them on our teams to be really effective because they notice things that we don't. I have two sensitives in my family, and that's why I had to learn about this stuff because I made a lot of mistakes in parenting and as a husband because I didn't understand this. Once I understood this, I was like, oh man, first of all, I messed up all over the place. But second of all, I appreciate the gifts that they have and how they've been able to help me with their intuition, their insight, noticing details that I don't notice. So we need the sensitives in our team to be functioning at a high level. And so this gives you a lot of insight about yourself or those around you and how we need to protect them. They take this to a higher level. Okay, so this is also in your handout, so don't try to take it all in. But we can take it even a step further. So cortisol is a great strategy for survival. Now look at all these strategies. Most people will talk about adrenaline, like fight or flight. Everyone knows about fight or flight, but it's much bigger than that. There's dopamine, there's oxytocin. And if you look at the 7 deadly sins, it gives you a good framework for recognizing all the ways in which we are designed for survival. All the deadly sins help with survival. Sin in the original Greek of the Bible was just meant off the mark. It didn't mean you were a bad person that's going to go to hell. It just meant off the mark. And so the sins are basically when you become so dominant by lower brain drives and chemicals that are trying to help you gather as much as possible in this life, it creates problems. So we're actually designed to get high. The dopamine high, the oxytocin high, the adrenaline high, the serotonin high, the GABA high, the IL-10 high, I can go on and on and on. We're designed to get high to help with survival. So you got cortisol and you've got all those, you've got hormones and you have neurochemicals, two big survival strategies. So one of the things on here that we showed you, and this is going to take you a little bit to wrap your head around this concept. It's going to throw off how you normally approach life. So how many of you, I mean, this is an obvious question, but how many of you think it's important to feel good about yourself? Everybody, right? I will show you that that's actually wrong. It's actually not important to feel good about yourself, that's actually just an addiction, pride. The best predictor of surviving for most of human history was how good what your social status was. That's how I'm defining pride. Higher brain pride is different. Feeling good about your product and feeling good about your service and feeling good about your competence, that's higher brain. That's creativity. That's different than the pride of validation or invalidation or social status. So social status was the #1 predictor of how long you were going to live for most of human history. Pride lights up in the brain just like crack cocaine. In fact, crack cocaine copies the pride system, right? So we're designed to be addicted to feeling good about ourselves. The problem is that if you want to feel good about yourself, you can't tolerate truth. Like the Jack Nicholson, what was that line? You can't handle the truth, right? From A Few Good Men, right? You need to handle the truth. You need to have accountability, metrics, as many people giving you feedback on your model of understanding. These are the 7 steps to genius, by the way. What's your model of understanding of your craft, your arena? Is it complete enough? Are you allowing people to challenge you? Is your model incomplete potentially? And if it's incomplete, now you know there's skills that aren't there. Now you have to practice to deficiency. That's painful. You have to have metrics. That's painful. You have to have coaching. That's painful. You have to have social accountability. That's painful. These are all painful because we don't like to be diminished. But if we don't care anymore, if we let go of that addiction, now we are on our way to becoming more and more powerful. Because now we take the truth and we take the feedback and we cycle rapidly and neuroplasticity is taking off and now we're becoming more and more powerful. So it's about feeling good about yourself or being great. Which one do you want? I say choose being great and really enjoy the ride. So we're designed for pride addiction. We're designed to avoid loss. And you take those together and we are very fearful creatures. We are much more conservative than you think we are. We narrow our lives much more than we should or need to because we're designed to avoid loss. We're designed to avoid rejection. We're designed to avoid failure. But I'm telling you, that's a false story of the brain. You don't have to care about that. You have to care about improving, of course. You have to care about addiction and depression. We want these things to be fixed. But you won't be able to fix them if you can't face the truth that's going on in here. And we're going to get to that in a second. So there's a conundrum. You can just avoid life and say, I don't want to deal with this roller coaster ride of hormones and chemicals, right? Because that's painful, it's stressful, it shuts off my brain. I don't want to do that. Problem is, if you don't engage life, it sends the message to your brain that it's dangerous out there. And all the positive chemicals that cause you to be happy and really highly effective start to disappear anyways. You can't win for losing. It's like God set up this game so we're forced to play, right? You don't play, you get depressed. You play and you get stressed out, you get depressed. So, but there's a middle way in which we can navigate this game really effectively. So that's the problem. A lot of people take the easy way out and shut down and avoid life, and you're going to pay a price because you're going to become lower brain dominant anyways. So we're going to outfox this design. So Henry David Thoreau, a famous philosopher from the Northeast in the 1850s, talked about the idea that most men, most people, lead lives of quiet desperation and go to the grave with the song still in them. In other words, most of us are not living life fully alive and fully passionate and growing and discovering. That's why, by the way, I love that book, Primed to Perform. I was inspired by that. So that's thanks to your leadership, and I guess Jim Baird gets special call out for that book. That's a wonderful book. How many of you read Primed to Perform? It's a trick question. How many of you have not read it? Oh, so not. I thought everyone was pretty much reading it. Okay, so Primed to Perform, highly recommend that book. But in a nutshell, 3 predictors of being happy at the workplace and 3 predictors of not being so happy. One of the big predictors is play, is being able to really grow, to learn, to experiment. But the problem is if we're trying to avoid failure and avoid loss, you're not going to do that. So there's a struggle there. And the problem with our school system is it gave the message that there's a couple people that are smart and everybody else is, okay. So why would you want to learn if it meant the risk of failure, the risk of rejection? Why would you want to learn? Why would you want to be exposed to failure, metrics, all this stuff, right? So we need to undo that brain trickery in order to become more and more courageous and being faster and faster at learning. And then we'll live life really alive. Here's a fun question. Let's say you're driving along and you get in a car accident. and you break your leg. How many of you that would say that that's good? How many would you would say that that's bad? Yeah. Turns out that that's wrong. Okay, so the story continues. You end up going to the hospital, and you end up meeting nurse, doctor, you pick, man, woman, you pick. They end up being your best friend. They end up being your lifelong mate, let's say. Now, was that broken leg good or bad? That broken leg was awesome. It was the greatest thing that could have happened. Okay, so this is the fourth lower brain problem. We are very judgmental. We really have this desire to label the world good, bad, good, bad, good, bad. Like we're doing this like thousands of times a day. Why? Why do we do that? When in doubt, the answer is always survival. This whole lower brain thing is all about survival, right? 27 years life expectancy. So we had to try to model the world in order to get a better handle on the world. But now the legacy of that constant appraisal of the environment is it's really jacking up our lower brain, constant judgment. And on top of that, it's like crack cocaine to be able to put people down. Gossiping, putting people down, judging them, bragging, that's all dopamine, that's all crack cocaine. Facebook likes, dislikes, right? Facebook is being accused now of hacking into our brains. It's true. They're harnessing dopamine. It's a drug. And they're saying, we got you because you can't resist those likes. And so they're coming under heavy criticism for social engineering, that and other reasons. We know where all these parts of the brain are now, and we know how they all interact with each other. This is all based on science, and this is very powerful in a negative way. This is in your handout. Oh, I should be saying that this is in your handout, this is in your handout, right? Okay. This is in your handout, and basically any problem in life or any good thing in life, I can explain by lower brain or higher brain dominance. That's it. So you can have fun studying this chart on your own, and you'll be like, wow, on a 1 to 10 scale, 1 being totally lower brain dominant, empty bucket, all the neurotransmitters and hormones and getting high, all those things are gone, I'm empty bucket, lower brain. Or am I full bucket, higher brain dominant, and I'm just high all the time? You can tell where you are and what functionality is going on based on where you are. So that's for future reference. So the AI problem is right here. Lower brain, these are hunter-gatherer brains. These aren't farmer brains. These are hunter-gatherer brains that are just colliding with the modern world and creating all kinds of problems now. And we need to stabilize these brains in order to take advantage of all this wonderful chaos. So chaos can be really bad, or chaos can be awesome, because there's so much opportunity to be creative. We want to go in the awesome category. Do not beat yourself up for any struggle. I tell you right off the bat, I have issues with anxiety, anger. I'm constantly apologizing to nurses because I've got a near-death situation that's happening, and I a little bit overreact and start yelling at people. Some would say, you're justified in doing that. I would say, no, I want to do better than that. I want to stay calm. But the point is, I still struggle with some of these issues, though. I can get triggered. There's anxiety issues, anger issues, insecurity. Criticism is still hard for me. The robot's still there, so I have to just be aware of it and constantly be aware of what my triggers are, what my vulnerabilities are. And so I'm a joyful scientist, constantly optimizing. Like someone said earlier, where do I position myself in the world, and then how do I deal with my vulnerabilities? So have fun cracking your code, your computer code. So takeaway. American society in crisis, the war is within, and you as leaders, managers are vital in order to help your brethren stabilize and then go higher and then bring these ideas into the community. Because there's no other community left. Like small communities are gone, small towns are gone, extended families are gone, people hanging out at church is gone, like it's all gone. There's the only community possibility that's left is in an organization. So organizations, paradoxically, are like one of our last hopes of being able to stabilize as a nation and go higher. And we are the beacon of hope for the world, but we need to get our house in order as a nation and then go higher again, like we typically do. Like I said, you now know how powerful this machinery is. And even if you simply ask yourself the question 40 or 50 times a day, am I lower brain right now or am I higher brain right now? You will know the answer. And you'll shift yourself to higher brain. And you will notice changes happening over time and how much more stable you become and how much more powerful and how much more happy you become. So even if you just take that one tool away from this, it will start shifting your life.